Sarah Baartman, the Hottentot Venus. Do you know her sad story? Used in the human circuses of the time, at the beginning of the 19th century in Europe, I now accompany you in this story of the Hottentot Venus. Let's start from her origins. Who was she? Where was she born? Her name was Saartjie Baartman, which used to be translated as Sarah, born in the Eastern Cape, which is now South Africa, in 1789, and died in Paris on the 29th of December 1815, rumored to be smallpox that killed her. Others say syphilis, but it's not properly known, certainly due to the conditions she worked in, which didn't help her to be healthy, a topic that we'll delve into shortly. She was part of the Khoikhoi ethnic group of the time. Unfortunately, poor Sarah was orphaned at a very young age, while her father was killed during an African commando. After this event, he moved to Cape Town, leading a free life, but in reality, in conditions very similar to the life of the classic slaves of the era of the English and French colonies. Some sources, which are not very clear, say that Sarah had 2 unborn children who died very prematurely. Sarah's work and path. She was taken by Hendrick Cezar, a black slave trader. It's not specified what he did, although we assume nothing very pleasant. Some time ago, she moved in with Hendrick Cezar's brother and subsequently had an affair and love affair with a Dutchman. One day, she'll meet William Dunlop, a military surgeon on duty near where she lived. William, as well as being a surgeon, was also in contact with associations of the time, which dealt with black slavery in Cape Town with a very specific purpose: to look for a phenomena sideshow to be sent to freak shows, the so-called human zoos, which was growing in popularity in Europe, a show to see people with more unique than rare characteristics. William advised Sarah to go and perform and move to these freak shows, telling her that she could get a lot of money and wealth, which later turned out not to be true. Sarah thought about it for a moment and was not at all convinced that she wanted to go. However, Hendrick Cezar found himself in a difficult economic situation, and so he took a look at this opportunity proposed to Sarah and convinced her to leave for England on a long boat trip in 1810. But why did Sarah have to go to these freak shows? Sarah had a unique physical shape. She was only 1 meter and 30 centimeters tall and was suffering from a disease called Steatopygia, a condition that causes a lot of fat to accumulate on the buttocks, a very common characteristic in her era, but unusual in the eyes of Europeans, who immediately turned their head in her direction. Baartman had another very unique feature in her body, called macronymph, which caused her vulva lips to grow 8 centimeters long, which she used to cover with this special garment. An interesting anecdote that is as early as Paleolithic times. Small statuettes representing Sarah's physical condition were found. A magnificent example is the Willendorf statue that I recommend you look for. Let's take a very short break and invite you to subscribe to the channel and give us a nice like. If you don't do so, we'll send you to a freak show. Jokes aside, let's continue. Her time in England, with performances and court, Sarah lived in a very important and wealthy neighborhood in London together with Hendrick Cezar, a certain Alexander Dunlop, and 2 African slaves who were not sure but are believed they were exported by Alexander from the same place where Sarah comes from Cape Town. Sarah's first freak show performance was in an Egyptian hall in the Piccadilly Circus on the 24th of November 1810, which featured Alexander Dunlop and was hosted by Hendrick Cezar. However, a problem occurred. In 1807, the Slave Trade Act had been coined, a law that prohibited the exchange and exploitation of slaves. In fact, after the performance, Sarah was taken to court to ascertain the dynamics of how this show happened. 3 hours of interrogation passed in which the police tried to find out if Sarah had exposed herself voluntarily and freely, or whether she had been forced by Hendrick Cezar. Unfortunately, even today, it's not known precisely whether she had exhibited herself voluntarily or forced. But at the end of the interrogation, the court declared that she had exhibited herself as a woman free, and that at the end of the show, she would have received 50% of the compensation. It's thought that the court was bribed to give this sentence, but we'll never know. There was a positive aspect for Baartman after the court case. She gained a lot of popularity, so much so that she also performed at a fair in Limerick, Ireland in 1812, and later in Suffolk. In 1811, she married and baptized on the same day in Manchester, although the man she married to this day is unknown. Her time in France. Around 1814, Sarah was transferred to France, protected by a man named Henry Taylor, who, seeing her physical characteristics, had the idea of proposing her to some of his entrepreneur friends. One of these was an animal trainer, a certain Rayo, who bought Sarah and put her on display at the Palais Royal for 15 months in a sorry state. In this place, she became a slave and was literally studied as a scientific phenomenon. Out of these natural scientists who studied her, there was Georges Cuvier, head of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. There's a testimony about this by Georges' younger brother, named Frédéric Cuvier, who says these words: "She was forced to undress and be portrayed naked, although let's say that it wasn't entirely true, since she had a small piece of clothing to cover her genitals with herself, to guarantee her that little privacy that was now outraged. There were some episodes in which those who studied her offered her money if she would remove her underwear, but Sarah always refused. Unfortunately, after exhausting months in inhumane and horrible conditions, she died on December 29, 1815, at the age of only 26. There in Paris, it was said by scholars that she was said to be a slave, and that on some occasions she was even put on a leash. Cuvier wrote on one of her monographs stating that Sarah was a very intelligent person with strong mnemonic abilities, especially in remembering faces. She was also very proficient at speaking Dutch, Middle English, and even some French. He describes Baartman's feet as tender and her arms and back as graceful. She was also good at dancing the typical dances of her hometown, and she was also very good at using the harp, as well as having a very serene and lively character. Actions in honor of Sarah Baartman. After her death, Georges Cuvier exported the brain, genitals, and entire skeleton from her body and put them on display at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris until the 1970s. People became aware of her story with the release of Stephen Jay's book, Gould the Hottentot Venus, and the story was also illuminated by Nelson Mandela, noted apartheid activist and head of state in 1994 of what is now South Africa, who managed to bring the remains of Baartman back from France to South Africa in 2002. And today, her remains are located in the Gamtoos River Valley. Other beautiful works dedicated to her are today a part of one of the most important universities in Cape Town and the Saartjie Baartman Center for Women and Children, a center for women and children who have been victims of domestic violence. Sarah Baartman's life was truly challenging. I'm sure she interested you and made you think about issues such as racism and the ridicule of facial features. I invite you to subscribe, leave a like, and let us know your important opinion. To get more wonderful stories, support us, and if you want, watch these videos that'll appear on screen. I wish you a beautiful day.